everybody, I'm Den Haring. Welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365, and welcome back to Top Water Tuesday. Today we're going to be talking about a specific presentation when a finesse top water presentation is what's called for. And we're going to be using and showing the Big Bait Bites Real Deal Shad. So this is a specific technique that I'm going to show you that works well when, under certain circumstances. So I'm going to describe the bait, describe the technique, and describe the circumstances where it works best. This is it. It's the Real Deal Shad here by Big Bite Baits. They come in a lot of nice colors, and I'm using an owner twist lock hook. And depending on the size of the bait, that determines what size hook I use. So this is a 4-inch Big Bite Bait Real Deal Shad. They come in different sizes. I think you can get a 3-inch, a 4-inch, and a 5-inch. This is the 4-inch, and I found that the 4-aught twist lock hook from Owner works best. This is a 5-aught here, and so you can see it's got this little twist lock pin in it. You just twist it into the bait until it's all the way down, and then we're going to hook the bait sideways. We're going to put the hook through the bait sideways like this, so it'll run flat like this on the surface. And so these tails will kick on the surface. It's a very subtle kick, but there are times when that works very well. And one of the times I'm thinking of is pretty early in the spring, when the water temperature's finally rising through the 60s into low 70 range. When that starts to happen, high 50s through the 60s into 70, and you have steady weather, this bait can be really good, specifically thrown in lily pads that are just starting to emerge. And when the pads are just starting to emerge, it's warm. It's usually in shallower water. The sun, if you have some good sunny days, the sun's warming that water up. The bait fish are in there. The bass are in there. And they have some cover. They have some ways to ambush the fish because there's some pads. The pads aren't thick yet, but there are different patches of them here and there. That's when this bait really shines, and you can really catch some big fish. Now, you can use this in the summer, too, especially throwing in the pads, and it'll catch them then, too. But it's really, really geared well for when you want that subtle top water noise. This will not make a lot of commotion on the water. And in those cases, when it's spring like that, oftentimes I find that less of a commotion is better. So you have these tails that make a subtle sound, a subtle kick, not a lot of commotion, but some. And then what you can do with this bait is where I really like, where I think it really shines, is when you're throwing it out there in those pads, you reel it across the top of the water. It has that subtle kick, and then you stop it. I mean, you could reel it through and keep it constant, catch fish that way, but it really shines by running it, making it make that noise, and then stopping it. And then this thing looks like a dying shad or a dying sunfish, depending on the color you get. One of the lakes I fish has white perch in it, and this bait here looks a lot like those white perch, the color of it. And so I do well with that. But if you have a bluegill situation in the pads, then you choose a bluegill color. Big Bite Baits has some good different colors that you can buy this. One of the things I like about Big Bite Baits is that they're not expensive, and yet they're very effective. They catch fish, they don't cost a lot. Zoom baits are similar. So when you kill this bait, it tends to go in that death spiral. It does a little bit of a death spiral or a circle, and then you could jerk it along like it's struggling. You let it sink down, you jerk it along, it comes up to the top of the pads, and then just slowly sinks back down again. And every time you twitch it or jerk it a little bit, those tails kick. So it looks like it's, a dying or sick bait fish, and that is what is one of the keys to catching the fish. Now, when I'm fishing in pads that are sparse, that are just getting started, I like to use braided line. I'll use a topwater rod. I'll use I like this, well, let me show you. This is hold on here, let me get control of everything here. This is a Dobbins Fury rod. It's a 7-foot FR704C, It's meant for Texas rigs, Carolina rigs, spinner baits, and horny toads. This is a very similar technique to a horny toad. And I like to use this Revo rocket because as soon as the bait lands in the water, this is such a fast reel. It's like a 10.1 to 1 gear ratio, crazy ratio. As soon as you start reeling, it brings it right up to the surface. And then if you stop it, obviously it'll sink back down. But I like that Revo rocket for any kind of toad type bait retrieve, or the retrieve for this big bite bait real deal shad. It's also good for buzz baits. That's what I'm using. Just the Fury rod you can get for 120 or less if you get it on sale. This reel costs a little more, but you don't have to have the rocket, but you do want a high-speed reel for this application. The faster speed reel you can get, the easier it is to work these baits. Now I have this one on here. It's on straight braid, 50-pound test. And I would fish it on straight braid if the pads were real thick and I was just jumping it across pads. Like you have these big pads and you're just kind of letting it fall between them and jumping them on top and falling between. That's more of a summer pattern. But in the spring, if those pads are sparse, then I would use 50-pound braid and I would tie 17 to 20-pound monofilament, colored green monofilament line, about a liter, maybe a rod or two lengths in length, and use it that way. That way I have the braid, but I also have that mono leader that the fish don't get too shy seeing or hearing that braid in those sparse pads. That's how I like to fish it. I was looking at this bait, just kind of experimenting with it to see how it would look in the water, and I really like the way it looks. And then I was, taking a look at the profile of this one specifically, and the color, and you look at that color and you look at that profile, and the first thing that pops out to me is, wow, that's about the same size as the alewives are in a lot of the lakes that I fish, like Beltsville, Wallen Paulpack, and a lot of the others, when the striper bite's going on at night in May and June, which we've often talked about. And I'm thinking, I've never tried this at night, but I bet under certain circumstances, this thing would catch them. Just letting it fall and twitching it and making it look like it's injured and swimming all around just under the surface. I'm going to have to play with that a little bit maybe this year in the spring and see how I do. And if I do well with it, I will report back to you. But boy, that's about the same size. The color is very similar. I like that profile. Give it a try. If you haven't fished this as a topwater, this is something that most people haven't thought about doing, but this bait is perfectly set up for it. The 4-incher one is, it's not the heaviest bait. That's why I like to use these bigger. This is a pretty good size hook, this owner twist lock. It's got some weight to it. Helps me cast the bait. And if I was fishing at where I had, bigger fish, I would choose the 5-inch version. I don't have any 5-inchers with me right now, but I'll be buying them. But I would show you that if I had it, because I think that it's just easier to see what I'm doing and everything. And I would use a 5/0 hook instead of a 4/0. This is a 4/0 in this bait. I'd use a 5/0 if I had a 5-inch bait. And I'll be buying them, and I'll be throwing it, because where I like to fish Nockamixon with those pads, there's a lot of big bass. And I'm looking for it. And Onalani as well is another place. That was the place I was thinking of that has the white perch. And, those white perch look a lot like this bait as well. And anyway, I encourage you to give this a try, especially in spring when the pads are just coming up. This would also be great bait to fish over milfoil beds and that kind of thing. If you wanted to put a Texas rig weight in front of it, it's another way to fish it. Just let it go down. This is a nice bait for punching, actually, to get through, because it doesn't have a lot of appendages. It will get through the thick weeds pretty nicely, and yet it still has a kicking tail. As it goes down, you can see how that tail separates. So they kick opposite each other, and it has a really nice natural swim under the water. Simple bait, but a very effective bait as well. Well, that's it for this Topwater Tuesday. If you like that video, please give me the thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification icon. That way you'll be notified when the next video is coming out. Next week we'll be doing an even more of a finesse presentation, where it's a topwater presentation where you need a spinning rod to actually present the bait. Looking forward to showing that one to you, so stay tuned. That'll be on the next Topwater Tuesday, and we'll probably put a video in between there, maybe a video or two in between as well. Very, very cold out right now. I'm hoping that we're supposed to, we had temperatures that were 7 degrees at night, so most of the lakes are freezing up. But this weekend it's supposed to go in the high 50s, so maybe, just maybe, some of that ice will come off and I'll be able to get out there and make a video. We'll see. Whatever the case, be safe out there. Hope to see you on the water. And may God bless your fishing endeavors.